Hello, everyone. I'm excited today to share with you Kathy from Ambassador Yoga. Now, Kathy and I met years ago at the National Kids Yoga Conference, and we haven't been able to connect ever since. So I'm really excited to share her work with you. And we just, soon as we met, Kathy, we had this like instant bond, I feel like. I don't know if that was like that for you, but for me, it was also because you're from Canada, and that's where, my family is. But also, your work is really interesting. You've been doing this for decades, right? And so you've come and gone through different kinds of businesses. You've had the young yoga masters teaching children, but also with adults. You practice adult, you teach adult yoga. And now I want to talk to you about this yoga trainer track that you have. Because what's really interesting is that within our community, Kathy, we have kids yoga teachers and also teachers who are looking to have a side hustle. And within all of us have had to kind of recreate ourselves over the last 5 years, not just through COVID, but looking for how do we find our niche? How do we find our unique voice within the kids yoga world, right? So people like myself, I'm literacy based. I am obsessed with picture books, and that's really where, the digital and the product space, that's what I love, right? I used to be a teacher. There's those of us who are musicians within the kids yoga world. There's those of us who are leading teachers in schools. So there's lots of different areas. So to get started, let's talk about your background to share with us sort of what your journey's been within kids yoga and bring us up to the present day.
Okay, well, it feels like a long journey now because this year happens to be my 25th anniversary of becoming a yoga teacher,
That's
which
incredible.
still
Yeah.
blows my mind. And if you knew me as a kid, you wouldn't think like I was never an athlete or a really physical kid, although I love nature walks and stuff like that. But I found yoga after my first career was in social work, and I had an event happen at my job, which I won't really get into, and I ended up with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. And
Mhm.
so while I was off for a little bit, I discovered a yoga class, and it just fell in love. And I think a lot of people can
Mhm.
relate to that story. It was like, ah, I'm home.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking, like, I didn't really want to go back to my job, even though I was good at it.
Mhm.
I thought it was important work, and honestly, I thought it was honorable work. Like for me, that's already always been an important part of my work. So it's something I kind of believe in. And I remember reading this book called Do What You Love and the Money Will
Mhm.
Follow. It's like
Right.
it's a really old book. Have you heard of that one?
Yes. Yep.
And I didn't know what I loved. Like I was like, I have no clue. Like even though I loved yoga, in my mind it didn't click. It actually took me like a few weeks after that, and they had little things about like, what do you look forward to doing? And
Mhm.
I one day I was riding my bike to yoga class, and I was like feeling really happy. And if you've ever had post-traumatic stress, like that's not how you
Mhm.
usually feel. And I was like, oh look, I'm happy. I noticed myself being happy. And so I've kind of used that philosophy of like try to do what you love and the money will follow, through all my different careers in kids yoga and adult yoga. So I started off teaching adults, and eventually, that philosophy of do what you love led me to kids yoga. And not only did I love teaching kids yoga, but I actually love the schedule.
Right. Yes. Right.
Because teaching adults, it was like all week evenings and weekends, and kids yoga was during the day. So sometimes there's a lot of different things to love about something.
Yeah.
And that led to kids yoga. And eventually, like I felt like I didn't want to. I was teaching 25 classes a week at one point, and people
Mm.
would call me for classes, so through word of mouth. And then I started thinking like, oh, I should be training new teachers now that
Mm.
I have all this experience and I know how. So then that led me to teacher training, and I got into kids yoga teacher training. And it's a long journey. The kids that I first taught, in 1998 when I became a yoga teacher, they're having their kids now. And I just saw there was a gap in
Mm,
teen yoga.
mm,
And I was thinking of, one thing I did do as a kid was I took swimming lessons. And when I was a teen, I became a lifeguard because I
mm,
took, the real qualifications to be a lifeguard. And I kind of thought, like, why shouldn't teens be able to do that? Because some of them have been doing yoga for so long. Some of them, like some of the kids I taught were 2 years old, and then suddenly they were 14, 15 years old.
right.
And so I thought, well, why shouldn't they be able to become a real yoga teacher with a real certification? So I had that idea for a long time, like about 5 years, and I just never found the time to write the program until I met my friend Claire, who became my business partner. And I hope you talk to her about that.
Yes.
and and then she came along and she was like, I'm going to be the one to help you do this. And so together we worked on it, and the whole time we were like, if it's this hard for me to do it,
Yeah.
and I really love yoga, and I'm really into it, then it's going to be hard for other people. And so wouldn't it be great if we could just let them license this program to teach teen yoga teacher training? And so that kind of became a little bit of a niche for me. And obviously they have to qualify, like especially if they're going to run a Yoga Alliance training, they have to qualify
Hmm.
as a trainer.
Right.
But our philosophy kind of was like, if they qualify with Yoga Alliance, they qualify with us, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we can just like make that easier for them. And through the years I've seen a lot of different things happen in the yoga world. I started in the Kundalini yoga world, which has been really disappointing what happened in that community. And I saw like there were all these rules. Like at one point, I thought of being a trainer as a Kundalini yoga trainer, but I wasn't allowed, because to do that, you had to like wear a turban and jump
Mhm.
through all these hoops and stuff. And then I saw people who were doing all those jumping through all the hoops kind of thing, but they weren't actually very good teachers. But
Mm,
they were becoming trainers, and this kind of clicked in my head, like the skills to write a teacher training aren't necessarily the same skills to be a good teacher. And to someone there's a lot of great teachers out there who maybe just aren't into researching and figuring out how to do a table of contents and in Word, and
yes, right.
documenting things, and footnoting and stuff. And I thought, like, those are two different skill sets that
Absolutely.
someone shouldn't have to be limited to be a teacher trainer just because
Mm,
they don't have that skill set when they're an experienced yoga teacher. So that was kind of our philosophy behind the training.
mm,
And I thought, like, wouldn't it be great if the kids yoga teachers who took those kids from children's yoga
mm.
and bridge the gap into adult yoga with them, because there is a little bit of a gap there, which we found we have this teen leadership program that we use to bridge that gap um, for children, and we also sell that. But it's a little bit like you can't go from kids yoga just straight into an adult yoga class. You have to kind of help handhold a little bit the tweens and the teens to get there. Um, but wouldn't it be great if that teacher who did that could be the one to take them through teacher training?
Right.
So yeah, that was like the
Mhm.
niche kind of came out of my passions, out of
Yes, yeah, that's my takeaway definitely is that you've this got this thread of doing what you love, doing what you love and your passion, but it's that intersection we talk about, right? I don't know who originally wrote it, but the pie chart, the Venn diagram of doing what you love, right? So what you really love, what you're passionate about, and also what you're trained in. So what your experience and your education and your background that way and your expertise. And then also the third piece is what the market will pay for. So that sounds like it really was the intersection of those three things, is that you're using what you love and your passion, but also your skill set was there too. And then when you put it out in the world, I'm sure you did some research to see, is this really something that people will buy? Because you're talking about massive programs, your 200-hour programs, right? And before you embark on that, I'm sure you had to figure out, is anyone going to buy this, right? Is there a need for it?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was the great thing was my, strategic partnerships are really helpful. And partnering with Claire, she had two storefront studios.
Mm,
She also had two kids who were getting to be the tween age. So, we got to test it out at
mm,
her studios and tweak the system and find out what people wanted. I mean, the teen leadership program was, behind yoga teacher training,
mm,
was really like the second biggest income earner at her studio. and
mm.
and usually most studios, like, this isn't a secret, I think most people know this, like yoga teacher training is typically the biggest income earner for a studio,
Right.
especially now. Like, now things have changed because of online training, but for people who do want an in-person experience where you're like getting to know your trainers and you're in groups and you leave with a cohort, like, I'm still friends with people from my teacher training in 1998. Like,
Right. Yeah.
it's a really
Same.
powerful
Yes. Yeah.
experience.
Right.
So that experience is still out there for the people who
Mhm.
want it. And
Right.
yeah.
So what are your sort of your tips? Because you've worked with lots of different yoga teacher trainers over the years, right? And watching them go through their journeys, even though they're coming through your program and you've got this license that you have, what are your sort of your tips that you've seen how they've come through and found their own niches within the kids yoga world?
Well, I mean, the honestly, the we don't end up selling the yoga trainer fast track to that many kids yoga teachers. We tend to more start with the teen leadership
Yeah,
program.
right. Yeah.
And then some of them already have their own yoga teacher training. So
Mhm.
they just want to, like, I keep saying that word, like, it is like a bridge between kids yoga
Yes, right.
and adult
Right.
yoga. For niching, like, I think what the tips are to, like, if you're going to invest in a program, that you do the research and you make sure that there is a market for it in your
Mm,
community. So, like, one of the things we have is a, a an info session kit, where you can hold an info night about doing a teacher training. And I actually tell people to, just put the feelers out there even before you have a training,
yeah.
because that's what a lot of businesses do now, is like, let me test the market before I invest all the time in creating it. And I'm sure you've been there, I've been there, where I've created, like, I've spent like months creating something and then no one signs up for it, and it was like, oh crap, I should have seen if someone was going to sign up first. So even just saying, like, oh, we're thinking of offering a yoga teacher training, come for an info session. And at that info session, there's, a little postcard that we give out, where you can give the students to hand back to you with, like, when they want to start, what kind of, do they want weekend intensives, or do they want a whole 2-month intensive. So get that information before you start either writing the program yourself or investing in something like the Yoga Trainer Fast Track.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I'm with you on that. I would say that would be the top tip, is right. Ask the community. And I love the way you were actually given the example of in person. So at Kids Yoga Stories, our business is mostly digital, right? On and online and virtual. So what we do is we send out a survey as such to our community, asking them, and then we have some questions they fill in, and then we take that data. So you can do this either way. You can either do it in person, like you're describing, or send out a survey. And even if you don't have a large community, you could always send it out to friends or local community groups, or put it on your local Facebook page. You can start grassroots as well, but it doesn't, or get on the phone if it's in person. So you can do that different ways. But I love that tip number one. Absolutely ask around. People would be interested.
My second tip would be like also, you know, be open to your niche changing. And
Hmm.
you don't really know what your niche is always going to be when you start off. So I'll give you my example. When I first decided to leave my social work job and go into yoga teaching, they have this big business incubator program in, you know, run by the government you can apply for. And I got into it, and my business idea was that I was going to teach yoga and sell Ayurvedic food, like to people. And it said nothing about kids yoga in it. And
Yeah, right.
that just makes me laugh that I did this whole year long program that about something I didn't do. And you know, you just don't know. Like I had that passion, but when the reality of it came down of like, wow, like I'm gonna have to find a commercial kitchen and like do there were all these other steps that I didn't really think through when it was for my first idea. And
Hmm.
so then that business eventually morphed into kids yoga. um, One, because I love kids, and you know, I'm kind of fun. I'm the aunt, you know, I don't have kids of my own. And so I really have a lot of patience for kids, and I get how hard it is being a parent and an aunt, because sometimes like there are some days where I've taught 5 classes and I'm like, okay, take your kids and go home.
Yeah, yeah. Right.
I get to be like the fun aunt who comes in and does yoga with
Yeah,
everybody, and then just recharge. So that was always something like, and I love kids, so it was very fulfilling because,
yeah.
you know, all the hugs and the appreciation and the parents saying
Mhm.
like, you know, I saw my child in their room doing
Mhm.
the yoga thing you taught them. And I was like, oh, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm just, you know, getting rid of my sad thoughts or
Right.
something. You know, like I've had parents literally crying, as you probably have, you know, just saying thank you for giving my kids these skills. So it's very
Mm.
rewarding
Yeah,
that way. And then my niche, you know, within kids yoga, like there's lots of different niches within kids yoga that you want to explore for a while
mm,
before you choose one. And so I know like when people graduate from we have a 95-hour registered children's yoga school, young yoga masters. And when people graduate, you know, sometimes they get into like, oh, I think I need to build a website and, you know,
mm.
start all of this. And part of me, I'm just like, just start teaching. Because
Right,
what's on your website, maybe just a 1-page website with your bio and kids yoga classes, maybe a sign up page or something, but like you just don't even know where this journey is going to lead you.
right.
So just start teaching. That's always my number one tip for people who just graduated
Mm.
is, you know, and then you'll discover your niche from all those experiences.
Right. Yeah, and I find too it's about finding those yeses, right? And you know, when people graduate, they might find themselves in after school programs or preschool seems to be definitely an easier, as we've heard across lots of different people. Preschool is easier to get into because they're generally private preschools, right? Whereas elementary is harder to get into. But some people do, especially if you have a teaching or education background or social work or or school counselor background, or some people really love summer yoga camps, right? And so that can be a big one. Or even recess times, or coming in and providing yoga classes during the school day. So I agree that sometimes you just have to try lots of different things, and then you'll see what the yeses are. What's the natural
Mhm.
yeses that you get in your community, right? Or sometimes people have tried family yoga, or once. And as you say, I love the idea about being open, because it within our world, right? These A lot of our colleagues have come across unexpected projects, right? That you might be on television, or you might be asked to create a book. Some people have been contacted and say, I want a book on such and such. Can you write that for me? Or or I just talked to someone recently who's has every week she goes and teaches yoga to a group of refugee children,
Mhm.
right? So sometimes you just have to kind of put it out there, be clear on you. Like you said, it can be just a really simple website, not get stuck in all the business stuff, right? But I agree. I love that. Just get teaching and find your own unique voice, right? Which may be different than the person you learned from, right? So that doesn't always, once you've, how many of us, right? We take yoga teacher training and we sometimes find ourselves speaking like our teacher because you have so many hours listening to them, right? But once you go away, what is your unique voice? What's your passion? Yeah, trying to find that piece. I love that. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember that. It's my first year teaching thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm just saying everything like that."
Right, exactly. Yeah, I love that.
And then yeah, and then I think the third thing too, like from there, once you find that, is like teach it, let and but also let it change. Like so,
Mm,
I found for me, at first my passion was just teaching classes,
mm,
and and then I found, I really like teaching preschoolers because I like the schedule. That was probably for me around year 7 or 8 of teaching. And then my niche changed to teacher training, and now it's kind of like train the trainer. So it's
right.
going to change over the years. And one of the big tools that I use regularly is just doing a lot of planning and visioning for my business planning. I really make a habit of it around New Year's. For me, that time really works for me because it's also like a slow time in the business, and I like to sit down with all my post-it notes and
Oh, I love
markers
that. Mm,
and
yeah,
journal and
mhm,
planner, and
right,
I just think of like, what's changing. Just because that was my niche, it doesn't mean it has to be now.
right.
So letting it grow. My meditation teacher used to say, like, if your vision doesn't change, then it probably might become stagnant.
Mm,
So you want to let things grow and develop.
right. Yeah, and I think that the changing also, you were looking for opportunities, and that's how you came across your teen yoga, right? You saw the missing gap. It reminds me of when I was a teacher, picture books I was obsessed with, and then obviously I read fiction, but there wasn't a lot of teen tween books at that time. And now you see graphic novels and all kinds of books that are for that age group that so someone, they notice there's a gap there. And that's what you did. You saw there's a gap within teen yoga specifically, and your training would be very, as you say, very different than an adult yoga practice or from children, right? The teens and tweens need something specialized to them. So I love that. It wasn't just about watching the chain, being open to change, but looking for the opportunity that there was no one else in that area, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
I love that. That's great.
Creating something like, because all along we wanted to let people license it out. That was always our vision. Because
Yeah,
again, it's like where you see, like, if someone ever asks you, oh, can I be a trainer? Um, sometimes it's like, no, I'm having enough trouble being my own trainer. But then as a business thing, if you hear this question a few times, it's good to think like, well, what if, like, is there a way that could happen? What could that look like? And, especially going to the kids yoga conference, like I can't come to Washington to lead a teacher training. It just doesn't
right.
make sense. I have my area. And
Yeah,
so it really did make sense to license it out to other qualified trainers to offer
right,
it themselves.
right.
And then you mentioned a little earlier, like, how do they put their voice in it?
Mm,
The way we do that is like we have the basic information, but we have a lot of worksheets in it,
mm,
so that whoever the trainer is going to give their take on it and tell their stories of, the chakras are the chakras. That information doesn't really change that much, but how you would explain the chakras and how I would explain the chakras are probably different. And so there's the information in the manual,
mm.
but then there's worksheets where you're discussing and people are writing down what, let's say if you were the trainer, they would be writing down what you were saying, and then they're creating their own take on it as well. So that's why it's a 700-page manual.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I love that. I
But it,
want to highlight something else you said too there, Kathy, was that you you looked at what your schedule is. So you're not only looking at what you love, but also you want to create a business that you're excited to get up in the morning, right? And you went through a period where you were teaching preschool yoga 5 times a day, and a lot of people get to a point where they think this isn't sustainable, right? I just spoke to a special education teacher the other day. She was then teaching yoga, and then she realized, I can't. I'm getting older, I'm getting married, I want to start a family. I won't be able to drive through the traffic, 7 times a day to teach classes. And that's what you did, right? So you looked at your niche changed according to what's my ideal schedule. The adults are evenings and weekends, but actually I prefer to teach during the day. So that plays a part as well, doesn't it? Is
Yeah,
looking at how you want to teach.
all those one-time classes kind of those were gone. And
Right,
like at the end, like for instance, the one 5 classes a day, they were all 5 classes in the same location.
right, right.
So a lot of that was tweaking the schedule so that it was sustainable because I lived at that time in a city, Toronto.
Mhm.
Um, that's like I didn't drive, so I was riding my bike everywhere.
Right, right. And how do you do that with all your props and your
Oh my
materials and
gosh.
right?
Thank
Yeah,
goodness for iPods. That's all I can say.
yeah. Right, exactly.
To haul around my CDs, and when I first
Mhm.
started, it was cassette tapes, and we have to
Oh my
rewind
gosh, right? Oh, Kathy.
on kids.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing too to point out, to highlight that there is, I'm finding now, because a lot has changed in the last few years with the pandemic, and those of us who are still going as businesses, I see a commonality that we've had to reinvent ourselves and pivot and change and adapt to the changing times. And that's exactly what the story that you created for us, you shared with us, is that, you're still here in business successfully because you've changed and pivoted according to what the needs were and what was going on in the world, right? Whether it's in person or digital or licensing or whatever. So I think that's really important to highlight too, is that you don't always just start one business and then you're going to stay with that for 20 years and you have the same manual present in the same way at the same studio. That's not, and or just teach classes at this studio for time and time again. Even you were saying that Claire owns her own studios. Even as a studio owner, I'm sure those folks are going through changes, right? And the classes are changing, what they're offering changes, or maybe they rent out the studio to different people. I imagine that changes too, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately Claire's like closed down her studio over COVID. And
Right.
my business at first, it was like, that first time of being able to do online training, that was never allowed with Yoga Alliance. And then it was like, oh, this is awesome. And then it was like, oh, you can do it all online. And I thought, oh, this is great. And then like, so for the last year, and the overwhelming response from students was that they seemed to want it online as well. They wanted the flexibility. And this last 6 months, I kind of feel like I feel like my job right now is tech support. Like I'm not a trainer anymore.
Right.
I'm a tech support person. Like I can't move forward, or like just helping people. Here's how you clear cash, or here's how you.
Yes.
So now
Right.
Yoga Alliance, I mean, for me, because I kind of hitched my wagon to Yoga Alliance and I have the registered school and everything, I follow their rules. So now in 2024, for training, there will be a live component required again. So I'm kind of grateful that it's required because I miss that and I want to be meeting people and interacting with people. And even though it's a little less convenient, like I've seen like people graduate from the self-paced and they're ready to teach. So it's not any less that way, but they don't have any friends from the training. And I
Right.
want people to have their cohort to like, this is who I talk to when I'm like, I have this idea. What do you think? And so I'm kind of like looking forward to 2024. And my idea is to just really have more opportunities for live interaction, but on Zoom. Like I appreciate not having to drive in the winter, like it's, snowstorms and managing all that stuff. So I think for me, like, again, it's a lot of visioning, like to plan my next step in my business. I'm just like gonna take 1 month of not doing anything and really letting myself imagine everything that could be, and then decide from there. So sometimes we just jump too quickly,
Yeah. Oh, I
or I
love
do
that.
anyways. Maybe other people don't.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. That's your meditation piece coming in, I'm sure, is being mindful on taking that next step. Oh,
Mhm.
that's fantastic. Amazing. So how do we find you online? What's
Yeah,
people want to learn more about Young Yoga Masters or the Ambassador Yoga?
yeah, youngyogamasters.com is where I have my kids stuff. I recommend your books. I remember one time at the kids yoga conference, I brought back a whole bunch of grateful giraffes,
Oh,
and
right.
they sold like hotcakes. Like,
Oh, great. Oh, that's
so
lovely to
I
hear.
always think your material is so useful. But we have the registered children's yoga school training, and just connecting with you, I think, like, wouldn't it be great if we could do some kind of live training with all the kids yoga trainers in
Yes.
like somewhere like Costa Rica or
Oh my
some
gosh, I'm there.
place like that.
Totally. I
Like I
love
said,
it.
I'm putting everything on the table.
Yeah, I love it. It's been on my bucket list for ages.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, but so Young Yoga Masters, and then the yoga trainer fast track, we call it, or the yoga school fast track, where we license out the training to qualified trainers. That's at ambassadoryoga.com.
Okay,
Yeah. And so, yeah,
lovely.
and people can always email me at info@youngyogamasters.com if they have any questions.
Right, awesome. And for those people out there that are thinking to jump into kids yoga and are just hesitant or fearful or not sure, do you have any like advice for them to go for it?
I think it's part of it is the first thing is to just realize it's not going to be like adult yoga.
Yeah,
So if you
right.
love your adult class, kids aren't going to be doing that. So just picking like one game or one activity, like really just kind of doing yoga the way kids like to do it,
Yeah,
is a great way to connect. And then a lot of the activities we do, and I know your books are like this too, is they're fun, but then there's also like they're learning something in it, but they don't really realize it because they're having so much fun.
right.
So that's really great. So those
Yeah.
trainings and those resources, if you don't know how, are really important.
Awesome. Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much, Kathy. I so appreciate your time. I can't wait to share our chat with our community here at Kids Yoga Stories. Thank you, my dear. Take good care.